Hello and welcome to this week's lecture, which is on religion education, religious tolerance, and authentic learning environments. So the outcomes for this lecture is to understand religion education, to unpack the concept religious tolerance, and to also understand characteristics of an authentic learning environment. Now, before we begin unpacking religion education, just a small introduction. And the one thing I want to say is that in a diverse classroom setting, we must remember that there will be different or diverse religious beliefs and practices. And as educators, it is not our job to impose one or another religious systems onto our learners. And I think for this reason, we identify in general terms of what religion is and discuss why religion is an important element of society before moving on to the 6 major religions of the world. Now, these discussions act to solidify our engagement around teaching controversial issues in the classroom, as well as teaching in a diverse classroom setting. Now, as teachers, we need to be mindful that when we teach any element of religion or anything regarding controversial issues, we need to aim to teach this from a neutral perspective and not impose our beliefs or our values on our learners. So let us unpack what is religion. So religion can be understood through the following 8 aspects, which include your belief system, community, central myth, ritual, ethics, characteristics of emotional experience, material expression, and sacredness. Now, if we look at each of these elements, we are going to look at unpacking each element and look at how it relates to religion. So if we look at the belief system, this would basically be your worldview and how you would understand or interpret the universe. And if we look at community, this is basically a belief system that is shared amongst a certain group or community, or what is practiced by the certain group or community. Then we look at central myth, which is important stories that are retold or are reenacted, and this could be passed on from one generation to the next. And examples of this could be important events in the life of Krishna or enlightenment of Buddha or Jesus, and whatever religion it pertains to. But basically, these are central myths that are basically retold or reenacted. Now, when it comes to rituals, these are certain beliefs that are made real and reenacted through things like communion or ceremonies that are performed, or certain ritualistic events or ceremonies. So basically, this is all part of the ritual aspect. And then we look at ethics, which are rules guiding behavior, which can be viewed as given by the divine or socially generated. Like, for example, in Islam, obviously they are not allowed to consume alcohol. So that would be a certain ethics principle guiding their religion. And then we look at characteristics of emotional experience. And this is certain emotional experiences which are associated with certain religion. For example, guilt or devotion or inner peace. Then we look at things like material expression, which is the actual physical elements of a religion. For example, statues, ritual objects, flowers, clothing, incense, architecture such as your temples, churches, mosques. Then we look at aspects such as sacredness, which is the distinctions that are made between that of which is sacred and that of which is ordinary. And for example, through wearing different clothing or language. So these are the 8 major aspects which religion can generally be understood. So one may ask, what is the point of religion? And basically, this question seeks to answer why individuals and communities all over the world practice or follow religious systems. And the one thing we need to remember is that it is important to acknowledge that while we are all different and practice different religious practices or different religions, these may differ in terms of beliefs and rituals, and most religions exist for the following core functions. It obviously exists to answer our existential questions, to give our lives meaning and purpose, and to know right from wrong, and basically to know what is moral and immoral. So basically, these are the core functions of why religion exists. So the one thing we need to remember is that essentially people follow certain religions or religion because they wish to achieve the goal of salvation or reach enlightenment due to worship and obedience to God or gods. And different religions have different understandings of what salvation or enlightenment is, or what God is for that matter. So studying and teaching religion. Now, people come to study religions with the assumption based on their own religious beliefs and practices. And some of these assumptions might include things like all religions must have a holy text or worship a divine being. And through the study of religion, we become aware that some characteristics are shared across religions and others are not. So in terms of teaching religion in a diverse classroom, there are 2 common approaches that exist. And the one is that an educator will deny their own religion. They will pretend that they do not have a personal view at all and teach it from a totally neutral perspective. And the other view is that an educator will be loyal to their own convictions and they will try and convince or impose their own views on learners. So the one thing we need to consider is that while both views have validity in certain contexts, it must be understood that it is not the role of the educator to impose their own religious views and practices on learners in a diverse and multicultural setting. In fact, educators are required to employ a multi-religious approach to their teaching of religion. And the one thing we need to remember is that our practices need to be aligned with the policies that govern education. And when it comes to religion and education, we need to adhere to these multi-religious approaches when it comes to teaching. So how do we teach religion in a multicultural classroom? Now, this is a very difficult task because religion and emotions are often very closely related, and therefore this makes religion a very problematic topic to teach. Now, in order to engage this, an educator must have a strong sense of themselves and their identity. And a good starting point for an educator who must include religion in their classroom is to ask themselves, do I have factual information, the empathy, and sufficient understanding to explain a religion that I do not belong to in such a way that its followers will be happy with the way it is taught? Now, there are 2 common approaches that exist in relation to religious education. So the 2 approaches are your formative and your informative. Now, if we look at the informative and formative approaches, they are very, very different. So we'll start with the formative, and basically in this approach, teachers actively promote a religious view. So if it is their own religious view, they are obviously approaching this. Whereas in the informative view, it aims to stick to knowledge and facts only and not impose any religious views. The second part of the formative approach is that it has a spiritual function and religious practice that forms part of the lesson, for example, a prayer. Now, in the informative approach, you prepare learners for a multicultural and diverse society. So there is no emphasis on a specific religious practice. Now, in the formative approach, it can be considered indoctrination, and the informative approach, all religions receive the same time and attention. There is no doctrine and there's no specific focus on one particular religion. Now, the one thing we need to remember is that educators should be aware that by teaching or lecturing, we do not mean nurturing or propagating or imposing any particular faith. It is important that educators' approaches lie somewhere in the middle. Now, a useful approach associated with the informative approach and appropriate to multicultural education comes from the phenomenological research and is called the epoch. Now, this approach can be useful in teaching a variety of controversial issues in the classroom. Now, the word epoch comes from Greek origins, and it literally means bracketing or suspending. Therefore, this approach involves blocking one's biases and assumptions in order to explain or engage in a phenomenon that is social or scientific in terms of its own inherent system of meaning. Now, thus in practice, an educator may set aside their own religious beliefs in order to teach religion that they do not follow or practice without any bias or prejudice. So this is a phenomenon that basically embraces a multicultural approach to teaching and learning. Now, in this system, both educators and learners' backgrounds are a valuable resource to use. Now, for instance, you could start with the perception of your own learners, and you need to be aware of their religious diversity. You also need to watch out for discrimination, even if it is subtle. And students should always be encouraged to speak freely and confidently about their own beliefs and should never feel as if they are not a valuable resource. Now, cooperative and reciprocal learning is very important, and your learners need to cooperate and you need to cooperate, and this needs to be reciprocated. Now, you should allow learners practical experiences, example, visiting various holy places or inviting various speakers from the community to try and create some atmosphere and opportunity for interest in dialogue. Now, importantly, the aim is not to tell others what to believe or how to believe, but rather to acknowledge that exploring a variety of religions enables critical thinking while encouraging learners to engage creatively about matters of values and beliefs. Such teaching also facilitates personal growth as it allows members of a diverse community to appreciate the beauty of other beliefs and practices. So in other words, we need to embrace all religions and all cultures, and we need to learn to understand different religions and different religious practices and also appreciate it. And I think in doing this, it will help to reduce or eliminate aspects such as discrimination and prejudice. Now, there are 6 major religions in the world, and these 6 major religions include Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, Hinduism, Christianity, and African traditional religions. Now, I've chosen not to expand on each religion as I believe that you as the students are also a valuable resource. So what I've done is, in order to unpack these 6 major religions, you would have seen that on ECI, I have created a wiki. And basically what this entails is it is a beautiful collaborative resource which you all get to share something in. And basically this wiki is based on the 6 major religions. And what you are going to do, or what your task is for this activity, is basically you can choose any one of these religions and you can add your own information to this wiki. And you could type out something, you could add in pictures, you could even add in links. And I think this will create a beautiful resource, and you also get to share and be part of this experience. So now that we've spoken about religion, I think the one important thing we need to understand is religious tolerance. And basically, when it comes to religious tolerance, this is about recognizing and respecting the beliefs and practices of others. And it is an informative approach. It blocks out biases and assumptions, and it is aware and acknowledges diversity. Now, when we understand different religions and we practice religious tolerance, this helps to create an authentic learning environment. Now, as a teacher, how can you promote an authentic learning environment? And these are some of the aspects that help to create authentic learning environments. And the first one deals with having real world, relevant, and simply not classroom based experiences. Also provide students with opportunity to collaborate and provide students with the opportunity to examine the problem from different perspectives using a variety of resources. Now, this also requires students to reflect on their social and individual learning experiences. It also requires the integration of content from several disciplines and leads to outcomes beyond the specific learning objective. It also integrates assessments into the activities rather than employing external tests in an effort to be reflective of similar real-world assessments. It also leads to the creation of a polished product with value in their own right outside of simply earning a mark. Now, allow competing solutions and a diversity of outcomes instead of single or one component. So we must remember that our learners must be active participants in the learning experience. And I think just as we have valuable knowledge to impart, they also have their own experiences and views. And we need to embrace this and acknowledge these views and make them feel as if they are also valued. Thank you for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this session. Thank you.